Welcome to our first video lecture in Unit 3. We are beginning to look at human development, and today's focus is going to be on Module 3.1. What we're going to look at today is what are some of the major themes in developmental psychology, as well as how do we study and look at the development from birth through death. So first of all, three of the major themes in developmental psychology, or three kind of overarching questions that we ask ourselves. Those themes are nature versus nurture, continuity versus stages, and stability versus change. So the first question, nature versus nurture, you have the most background on this. We covered this during earlier units this school year. This question, this theory looks at how our genes interact with our experiences to impact our development. So how does our genetics and our environment work together in order to help us become the person that we are today? So it begs and asks the questions, why are we the way that we are? Are we that way because we inherited a genetic code that made us that way? Or are we the way that we are because the environment that we grew up in? As you know from our earlier unit, kind of the answer to that question has really been a combination of those two things. But they might beg the question and ask, why are we really good at sports? Is it because we're born with an athletic gene? Or because you practice a lot as a kid? Or is it a combination of both? Do you have the characteristics that you have or the talents that you have because of the genetics or because of the environment? And like I said, we have found really a combination of nature and nurture really work together. The second theme in developmental psychology is continuity versus stages. So this theory wants to look at, or this theme wants to look at what parts of developments are gradual and continuous versus which parts of us change abruptly and quickly. So it might ask the question, how do people grow and change? Do we change little by little by like kind of walking up a ramp? So it's like a slow change that occurs. Or do we grow in leaps and bounds where it's more like jumping up the stairs? So for example, it might look at, do we get better at thinking and problem solving slowly over time? Or is it suddenly like we have this sudden level up or change where we are thinking and our problem solve abilities suddenly get better almost overnight? And the third theme in developmental psychology looks at stability and change. And this wants to know what traits persist throughout our lifetime versus which ones change as we age. So it might ask the questions, what stays the same about us and what changes as we grow? Are there things that never really change, like our temperament of being shy or outgoing? Or do we become totally different people as we get older? Like we can learn to grow and be more confident? Or is our confidence kind of set when we're younger and that stays consistent? So an example, they might look at a child who's really stubborn as a child, and they want to look at, does that stubbornness last with them throughout their whole life? Or do they change and start to become more flexible as time goes on? So are we the same temperament and person in childhood as we are in adulthood, or does that change? So those are kind of like the three themes or areas in developmental psychology or lenses that we look through in order to try and understand what happens from birth through death. Second question is, how do we study? How do we study development? And these are two other research methods that you want to kind of add into your pocket of research methods. They are called cross-sectional and longitudinal studies. And these are specifically done within the realm of developmental psychology because it allows us to look and answer those questions of especially the stability versus change or the continuity versus stages. Because what it does is these studies force us to look at a multitude of ages and what the development looks like at each of those ages. The major difference between them is that cross-sectional is much faster. And what it's going to do is it's going to look at different age ranges at the same time. So I'm going to look at a group of 20 to 35-year-olds. I'm going to measure a group of 36 to 50-year-olds and 51 to 65-year-olds. And I'm going to compare and contrast something. So I'm going to look at those different age groups and see their problem-solving abilities. Is there a difference in 20 to 35-year-olds versus 36 to 50 versus 51 to 65? So the nice part about a cross-sectional study is this is very fast, right? I can get a lot of information about, 40 years of growth. As you can probably infer, some of the downfalls is, well, all of these people, the people in the 20 to 35 range, grew up in a very different generation and time period than those in the 51 to 65-year-old range. So are we really comparing the same types of people if they came from different generations? So that's where we also get into another option being a longitudinal study. In the difference between cross-sectional and longitudinal studies the same person for a long period of time, meaning they study that person from birth, maybe at age 5, at age 15, at age 25, 45, 65, 85. They're studying that same person. As you can imagine, the data that you get from a longitudinal study is really powerful because it's that same person's growth that we are looking at. However, to draw any conclusions in your study, it's going to take a really long time. There's some studies that we're going to talk about in class that happened over a 70-year period of time. That's 70 years of gathering data before you're able to draw any conclusions or before you're able to publish any data. And so, there's drawbacks and there's positives to both cross-sectional and longitudinal. It really just depends on what you're studying and what kind of funds you have available. It's going to cost a lot more money to do a longitudinal because you have to get those people to stick with you throughout the entirety of their life. That is it for today. Really short and sweet. Hope you have a wonderful day.